Yes, it's true. Brock Lesnar is back. I had to take a bit of a hiatus there. I was out of town in Arkansas with no signal for a few weeks there. And then afterwards, there were a few complications as far as family and children are concerned. That's probably why I'll never grow to the size of guys who can do this every single day. Much respect to them. Uh, there's guys that can do this every single day uninterrupted. Unfortunately, that's not something I'm able to do at this moment. If I ever grow large enough where I can sustain myself off of my fantasy basketball content, that's a different story. But as a side gig and hobby, just like all of you, there's things that sometimes you have to set aside. I understand that may come off as inconsistent, and I do apologize. I do care about you guys and all the support you've shown. So I want to come back and start making content again, but I can't promise there won't be some periods there where I kind of have to back up just out of virtue of life. So today I want to discuss the transaction trends for December 12th, 2019, and hopefully we can get some insight that I can share with you regarding which players we can target. All right, let's get started. So my man Duncan Robinson, the most relevant Duncan Robinson since the early 2000s Spurs championship. Man, he had a hell of a game. Played 43 minutes, had 10 three-pointers, 34 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. He's having a pretty decent season. Now, do keep in mind that before that, he found himself on some waiver wires due to this streaky performance right here. He did have 3 steals in 2 of those games, so there was still value. But you also have to keep in mind Goran Dragic is currently out with an injury and that the guy can be streaky. So I always recommend picking up players that you think are going to have sustainable production. And I'm not saying that he won't. It's a very large possibility that he will. But just make sure you're not dropping a player who does have sustainable production based on the fact that he just had 10 three-pointers and 34 points, because the next game he might miss 9 of his 10 three-pointers, have 3 points, and now you want to get rid of him. So be very cautious with streaky players like this. He's still young. He could be consistent. I'm not saying that he won't. Just be cautious. Same deal here. Kevin Porter Jr. being picked up heavily. And as you can see, he had 24 points at 6 three-pointers, 3 steals in a close game against the Houston Rockets. Now, similar deal with Kevin Porter Jr. He's young. He hasn't really produced well all season. Could this be the first game of a long streak? Sure. But it's a lot more likely that at some point he'll go through stretches like the stretches he's been having all season. So just be very cautious if you are going to pick him up. Normally I like to see a streak of 5, 6, 7 games of just consistent production where I'm getting fantasy value before I decide to make that plunge. The problem with that is there's people who get trigger happy after one game, so they may not be available. But in general, you'll have more consistent production instead of always chasing a guy that has a great game, and then the next game after you've picked him up, he has a bad game. So then you trade him for the other guy who had a great game, and you repeat this vicious cycle. And then as time goes on, you end up realizing a bunch of the guys you dropped ended up being more valuable than the guys you were chasing. Someone I hyped up early in the season. Big fan of his steals and blocks and the fact that he can hit three-pointers is Matisse Thybulle. Now, he was producing the last few games, largely due to Josh Richardson being out with a hamstring injury. But this last game, he had 26 minutes. Josh Richardson being back. If Josh Richardson is on a minutes limit, so he didn't play the full allotment of minutes he would normally play. But at the same time, this guy is really good defensively, so he may be playing himself into a consistent 20-plus minute role. So I can see, especially if you want to shore up your steals and blocks and you're good in other areas, I can definitely see myself taking a flyer on this guy. And I have in a couple of leagues. Definitely in deeper leagues I have. I don't know that I'm at a 12-team level yet, but I could be convinced that he's worthy of a 12-team league. Now, similar to Duncan Robinson, here you have Tim Hardaway Jr., who has been more consistent over the last few weeks. But last game, very similar to Duncan Robinson, hit 9 3-pointer shots, 77%, no turnovers, no rebounds and assists pretty much. He's going to be the same thing. He's going to have a game like that. People are going to rush to pick him up to see if he can keep doing it. And then he'll hit them with a 8 point, 2 rebound performance like he did here on December 1st against the Lakers. He has been getting consistent minutes and they've been winning. So that could bode well for his future outcome. And he's gone through long stretches of being a usable fantasy player in the past. But just keep that in mind. The reason he's available to pick up, despite having 6 3-pointers and 26 points on November 29th, is the fact that he followed that up with that 8 point performance. So if you have just dead weight, give it a shot. But again, be careful with dropping season-long production because you see this flash in the pan. Now, Jacob Poeltl is someone that I would recommend picking up at this point, out of virtue that blocks are so rare. And he's helping your field goal percentage and he's helping your blocks tremendously. Being able to produce that many blocks by himself is very valuable. And he's had blocks going back to November 18th. And a lot of those games, he's had 3 or more blocks. That's incredible value to get out of a big man, even in limited minutes. The San Antonio Spurs aren't having a great season, so at some point he may be unleashed. This happened at the end of last season where he started getting more minutes and he was winning people blocks during the NBA fantasy playoffs. So I would definitely pick him up. Low turnovers, good blocks. He's gotten some steals here and there. When he gets minutes, like he got 41 minutes versus Houston, he got those 15 rebounds. He has upside. So he's a player that I would definitely recommend picking up even in a 12-team league if you're really in need of a big man. Gary Harris has had a rough season. He's someone that I've moved on from in several of the leagues that I've been in. I think he has the potential to be a good player. He's been a very good player in the past. He's had a rough season so far. So if you believe in his upside and that he can get better, maybe pick him up, but just know he's been very streaky and inconsistent, and I personally might want to see another game or two. Because he has been proven in the past, I probably would pick him up quicker than I would someone who doesn't have proven experience, but really, I'm not rushing to pick him up just yet. So now something that I always advise is that players that suddenly find themselves getting minutes because of injuries are worthy of looking into and picking up. And that's what's happening here. Jamal Murray left the game with an injury. Monte Morris got 31 minutes. Last year when he was getting minutes, he was pretty productive. So if you believe that Jamal Murray may be gone for a little bit and then Morris is going to get minutes, he may be worthy of picking up for the duration of however long Jamal Murray is out, because now the path to minutes is there with the injury. He didn't have the greatest game, but people are picking him up based on the proven history of him being able to produce when given the minutes. Now, Alec Burks is a guy that I've shied away from, and surprisingly, he's been very consistent. So at this point, if he's available in your league, you might want to pick him up. That's pretty consistent production coming from him. He's getting over 30 minutes a game, and he has been since the end of November. He's scoring in the teens consistently. He's even sprinkling in some assists and steals. I would ride that hand while it's hot. So I would recommend him in a league where you're in need of a point guard. The opportunity is there. The path to minutes is there. He's probably one of those guys that's going to benefit as they rest Draymond Green and D'Angelo Russell in what's clearly a lost season for the Warriors in which they're tanking. Kendrick Nunn is being picked up heavily, but he may not be available in a lot of leagues because he's had a strong season overall. He had a really good game last game with 36 points, 4 assists. Just a lot of those Heat players went completely off. If he's somehow available in your league, pick him up. The minutes are there. The team believes in him. This guy has to be in the running for Rookie of the Year. He came out of nowhere. I don't know if there's a way he could win Most Improved Player as a rookie, but He definitely has the most improved perception of a rookie by far. Brandon Clark is another high upside young player that you may want to consider picking up. He got 22 minutes this last game. He was out with an injury, so some people likely dropped him during that span. He's very similar to Jaren Jackson Jr. in that he can hit 3-pointers, he can get rebounds, he can get blocks. He's been pretty productive in the limited minutes he's gotten, and as the season goes on, chances are his minutes will increase. So he's more of a stash right now. He's probably not going to wow you just yet, but I really have a feeling he's going to be a strong contributor later on in the season. And if you don't want to risk not being able to get him later, now may be the time to take that plunge. So my boy Bielitsa is a guy who's going to lose minutes because of the return of Marvin Bagley. Someone else who might be affected as well as Rashawn Holmes, but less so than Bielitsa. The reason being, Bagley's going to play those power forward minutes. But the Kings have been pretty successful with him getting minutes. So he may have more minutes than he had before the Bagley injury, but it's very unlikely that he's going to be able to produce at the same level, especially once De'Aaron Fox is back. That's more shots that are going to be off the table. I might hold on a few more games just to see what his role ends up being. But if there's a really hot free agent that you're interested in and you don't know who else to drop, this may be your drop. Here's a perfect example of what I mean, of a player that just has a great game. People rush to pick him up. Then he follows it up with a poor performance, and then people rush to drop him. DeAndre Hunter hasn't had the best season, but after that 28-point game, 64% shooting, he got 40 minutes against Miami. People rushed, they pick him up, and then had 6 points the following game. Now he's being dropped pretty heavily. So stop making decisions based on just the next 2 or 3 days unless you think it's going to win you the week. Start making decisions. If you think DeAndre Hunter's going to get it together and that in a few months he has the opportunity of being really good, then give him a few games. Don't drop him right away, because now next game he may have 25 points and you're like, darn it, I dropped him. I'm telling you, the number one thing that destroys good teams is them giving up on players that end up doing great just because they have a bad game or two. If you believe in a guy, trust your gut and play it out for a while before you give up hope. Because now he's being picked up heavily, but he's also being dropped heavily, as you can see. Somebody else that's being picked up is Joe Ingles, and he's had a streak of pretty consistent games. Now, Mike Conley hasn't been playing, so Joe Ingles gets the ball in his hands more, and he's a player that's just been productive as a sort of point forward for that Jazz team. So Mike Conley being out is definitely affecting that production, but he's been having probably his strongest stretch of the season. He's a proven fantasy player from the past, so he might be a player that I pick up, hoping that he can recapture some of that past consistency. Dylan Brooks is getting minutes on a tanking lottery team that wants to develop him, and he's been pretty consistent over the last few weeks. He's going to have some duds here and there, but he might be worthy of a look with your last roster spot in a 12-team league. 14-team leagues and deeper, I would definitely pick him up if he's available. He's not my favorite player, but it's hard to ignore that he's been pretty productive over the last few weeks. DeJounte Murray's one of those players that had a lot of preseason hype, but he's been struggling. His minutes have been low, and people are giving up hope. So if he's on your waiver wire, I still think his upside is there. The same potential he had that had people hyped is still there. It's early in the season still. He's a young player coming back from a major injury. He could really put it together at some point. And if he's on the waiver wire in the league I'm in, I'm taking a chance on him. Point guards are really thin this year, and this guy has as high of an upside as any other point guard out there. His lack of threes does hurt him some, but he's a guy that can get you a lot of steals very quickly. and normally isn't going to kill your turnovers. Uh, he's also a really good rebounder for his position, so he's someone I would heavily consider. Enos Cancer always puts up some sneaky value when he gets minutes. This last game, he had 27 minutes, had 18 points, 9 rebounds, 2 3-pointers, but that had mostly to do with Giannis being out for the game. Chances are Giannis will be back this next game, so his minutes will go back into the teens. In a deeper format, he can blow up in limited minutes. He's proven that repeatedly season after season, so he's someone I would consider in a deeper format. But in a shallower league, don't go rushing to pick him up. Giannis was out. Speaking of streaky scores, do you notice how most of these players on the waiver wire are just streaky scores? They get picked up, they get dropped. But Jordan Clarkson is one of the better ones. His inconsistency isn't as inconsistent as a lot of other players. I know I've picked him up here and there. Just he can hit a lot of threes. He can get you a few assists here and there. He can get you 20 points every other game. And if Kevin Love is gone, that's more shots that he's going to get. That's more opportunity he'll have to score. If you're really in need of a point guard, Jordan Clarkson's almost one that you can pick up. He's old reliable as far as waiver wire is concerned. Chances are he'll be there many times throughout the year. Chances are you'll drop him a lot, but there'll be times where he just makes sense for your team. PJ Washington, I think, is probably my favorite fantasy rookie so far this year. The places I was able to pick him up, I'm so satisfied with his production. Really high field goal percentage. He's hitting a decent amount of three-pointers. He's sprinkling in some points. The rebounds aren't high for a power forward, but 1.1 steals, almost an entire block per game, low turnovers. That's really good, sneaky production for a player who's likely only going to continue getting minutes as the season goes on. Look how many minutes he's getting. I think he's going to be even better than he has been. I wish I would have picked him up before during my drafts more than I have. I do have him on several teams, but I wish I had him on more teams. He's just been that good. Derrick Rose, very, 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 very similar to Jordan Clarkson in that he can get you some points, he can get you some assists. He's more consistent than Jordan Clarkson. He just hits less threes, and he tends to deal with injuries more. But he's been playing consistent minutes consistently since the end of November or mid-November, really. So if he's somehow available in your league, I would definitely consider picking him up, especially if you're needing scoring that isn't going to hurt your field goal percentage much. Karis LeVert's another guy that had a lot of hype before the season. Now he dealt with that injury, so a lot of people dropped him. I'm not a huge fan of players that have really bad field goal percentage, bad free throw percentage, and high turnovers. It's just not something I'm a fan of. That might get better once Kyrie's back, once he shakes off the rust. He still has the injury tag, so if you have your IR available, you might want to pick him up, throw him in the IR, see how he comes back. Maybe he's someone you could sweeten the trade with once he's back. He has enough value that I would say pick him up if you can throw him in an IR. But he's also probably not going to be a league-winning talent, so I wouldn't pick him up banking on that. Will Barton, someone else that I've been off and on about for the majority of the season. He gets you a lot of three-pointers. He gets you some blocks. He gets you some steals. He's pretty productive player for the most part. And with Jamal Murray being out for a little bit, we don't know how long yet, he may be more productive. As you can see, he had 40 minutes that game, and he produced 26, 7, 7, 2 steals, 2 blocks. That's beautiful production. Pick him up if he's available in your 12-team league or higher. I think he's definitely worthy of consideration, though he will have occasional duds and fluctuation in his minutes just based on the depth that those Nuggets have. And as you can see, they lost the last 3 games, so it's not like his production is correlating with wins as of yet. Jackson Hayes continues to get decent minutes and continues to get you some blocks. I probably prefer someone like Jacob Poeltl long term, but as the Pelicans keep getting blown out in all of these games they've been playing, they keep losing. Now they're saying Zion might not be back till early 2020. At some point, they may go full tank mode and he may have a lot of minutes. But as long as they have Derek Favors, once Derek Favors is back, I'm assuming Jackson Hayes is going to take a hit to his minutes. So just keep that in mind. Jeff Teague is someone I thought was pretty underrated this season. He's been a proven fantasy commodity in the past. He dealt with some injury issues last year and even this year. But he's had 32 points 2 times in the last 4 games. He has consistent minutes. The team has been losing, so that's never a good look. But if he's somehow in your league and someone gave up on him, you definitely might want to pick him up as a point guard. The point guard position is very shallow this year, and he can be very productive when he's hot. Dwight Powell, man, I've been believing in this guy all season. When he had his best game, he took that arm injury, but he came back. He didn't miss any time. I just think there's going to be a stretch of time where he's just really productive. It hasn't happened yet, but he's still starting. He's still getting the minutes. I think that game we saw on December 4th, once he gets over whatever's happening with his arm, I think you can expect some games like that sprinkled out throughout the season. He helps your field goal percentage. He doesn't kill your free throw percentage. Once he's better. Right now he's not doing the best, but he's been better over the last few weeks with his free throw percentage. He has upside. I guess that's what I'm saying. The upside is there. I've been picking him up in leagues where there's just no other centers to pick up. Banking on his upside, not his current production, but the upside he has the possibility of producing for me. Langston Galloway is another one of those streaky shooting guards. He pretty much only hits 3-pointers and scores points. He doesn't really help you anywhere else. His percentages have been pretty decent, so they've boosted his value. I'm in a 16-team league, and I haven't pulled the trigger on picking him up, so I think that says a lot. If you're in desperate need of a point guard, he's not the worst option, but I'm not fully convinced yet. Dennis Schrader, someone that's been on my teams and off my teams pretty consistently throughout the season, but it's hard to deny he's going through a very consistent streak right now of scoring. His field goal percentage has been above 45% since the end of November, and he was having strong games even before that. Also keep in mind he's a Chris Paul trade away from getting more minutes, getting more shots. So I've said in the past, in teams where you really are desperate for a point guard, Dennis Schrader's one to consider. The upside is there, but just keep in mind there'll be times where he hurts your field goal percentage, and he's not going to get you steals or blocks, and he might get you some high turnovers, but he has huge upside to be able to help you. If he's somehow on your waiver wire and you need a point guard, you need to go fix that now. Marc Gasol just has not been the same player this season, but he still had a pretty strong game. He's still making a lot of assists. He's getting you some blocks recently. His turnovers aren't super high considering how many assists he gets. He still may be on the waiver wire just because this production is so different from his usual production people were used to that they've given up hope on him. But I've held on to him in several leagues in which I've had him just because he does provide that sneaky value with the assist, with the nice free throw percentage. The field goal percentage hasn't been the greatest, but recently it's been better. Serge Ibaka is back, and for whatever reason, they just don't play well together. But if you're really in need of a center that has upside to be better, and he has been being better, I would strongly consider Marc Gasol. Norman Powell is a player that I just don't feel that strongly about in general. His percentages are decent. He does help in multiple categories. But that team is pretty loaded right now. Fred VanVleet was dealing with an injury, so he's more of a player that's just not going to be productive when the entire team is healthy. He's a player that they're going to plug in when there's an injury to the team, but when the team's fully healthy, he loses a lot of value, which is why I don't drop season-long value for just maybe a week of production. You only want to do that with a streamer spot. Aaron Baines has been a headache the last few weeks. He was so hot there for a while, but with all the missed games he's been having and the fact that DeAndre Ayton is coming back in the next few weeks here, there's a ticking time clock for Aaron Baines' value. So if you feel it's time to move on, it may not be the worst idea. Ben McLemore, I'm going to put him on the Norman Powell tier. He's a guy that's just getting minutes due to injuries, but once the team's fully healthy, his production is probably going to be ugly. He had a nice streak there of good games, but with Daniel House back and Eric Gordon is going to be back at some point, I wouldn't count on season-long value from Ben McLemore. Nerlens Noel, someone I've hyped in the past, and it's easy to see why. In 17 to 18 to 20 minutes, he can get you steals, blocks, good field goal percentage, good free throw percentage. Not going to get you any threes, and on occasion, he's going to get you a double-double. And he has the upside that if OKC at some point chooses to trade Steven Adams, Nerlens Noel may get 30-plus minutes, in which then he has the potential to put up top 20, 30 numbers. He's already doing so well in only 20 minutes. It's easy to extrapolate. He'll be even more productive with more minutes. That's why I've picked him up where he's available, even though on the surface, some of his games just don't look very strong, like 4 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. Then you see that steal, that block, that 0 turnovers, 50% shooting. That's good fantasy production. Similar deal here with Willie Cauley-Stein. He gets minutes in, more minutes than Nerlens Noel does, but he's sprinkling in those blocks. He's getting you low turnovers. His field goal percentage is usually nice. He's not as good of a free throw shooter, which is why his rank isn't as high. But if Willie Cauley-Stein's available in your league, if you're able to pick him up and Nerlens Noel, chances are you're doing really well in steals and blocks for two guys that are on the waiver wire. And steals and blocks are so valuable while keeping turnovers low. That's really key. Helping you in your percentages, keeping turnovers low, steals and blocks. That's 5 categories right there. People always go for the sizzle of a high points per game score and ignore guys like this when 3 blocks per game is probably equivalent to dropping 25 points. Now, don't quote me on that. I don't know the exact conversion, but 3 blocks from a player in that category is pretty much very streaky production and has for years, regardless of the opportunity available to him. He's had over 30 minutes these last 2 games, but that may drop to 15 minutes next game. It's really hard to tell with the Spurs. So I'm not rushing to pick him up, even though on occasion he does have pretty good games. Chris Dunn, similar to Nerlens Noel, it's just a guy when he gets minutes, gets you a lot of steals. He gets you some assists. He'll score on occasion. His field goal percentage and free throw percentage isn't the best, but he gets you so many steals that it makes up for a lot of that. So if you need a point guard and you need steals and you want to be strong in that category, so I'm talking about getting a Chris Dunn, Nerlens Noel, Willie Cauley-Stein, you may be giving up on points, but you become so strong at steals and blocks. And he's had low turnovers. So that's coming along with pretty low turnovers. That combination of steals, blocks, turnovers, and those big men to really pad out his low field goal percentage, that's just a very desirable combination that becomes hard to beat if you do it right. I'm going to speed along a bit because we're at the 30-minute mark. Kevin Huerter, he's someone that I would probably pick up. He's still coming off of that injury. He hasn't had the most consistent season, but he's been dealing with injuries. He hasn't really been able to build a rhythm. He's a guy that when he's hot, and I just expect that on this tanking Hawks team, his role is going to be large, especially later on this season when it most matters. Get you good assists. He can get you threes. His field goal percentage is normally better than what he's been doing. His turnovers tend to be low. He's someone you may want to pick up now, just stash him, banking on him being better later. Rashawn Holmes, man, I still remember saying At some point, they're going to start this guy, and that happened, and he's been so good. He's actually he's been kind of like Thomas Bryant, like almost in just his production. Uh, my only concern is his minutes did go down with Bagley coming back. They did win that game. It was a close game. I still think he's going to get minutes. I think he'll continue to get at least 25 minutes, and that's really all he needs to be productive. As you can see there with those 2 steals, a block, shooting 71%. I'm pretty sure he has the highest field goal percentage in the NBA, unless that's changed. Uh, he may probably not available on your waiver wire, but if you have him on your team, hold on to him. Ivica Zubac is another player that has sneaky value. His minutes are low, but he can sprinkle in blocks. He can get you occasional double doubles, and he shoots a pretty high field goal percentage and a pretty high free throw percentage with low turnovers. So if you just need a fourth big man, or you're just in desperate need of a big man, you could really help your percentages while not hurting your turnovers and helping your blocks by picking somebody like him up. And 6.7 rebounds isn't the worst. He doesn't have huge upside as long as he's getting such few minutes, but you can get some consistent production out of him. Rui Hachimura had 18 points, 12 rebounds, 43% shooting. But again, I worry with all those big men on the Wizards, my bad. Thomas Bryant is out, and once he's back, I think he cements it as getting 25 to 30 minutes a game. So those minutes will have to come out of somewhere. It's looking like it's probably going to be Rui at this point because Mo Wagner and Bertrands are killing it. But it's very unlikely that once Thomas Bryant is back, all of those big men will be able to eat. My guess is Rui is the odd man out. So if you pick him up, keep that in mind. Draymond Green had a triple-double, and they lost to the New York Knicks. So, yeah, Draymond definitely is at his best when he has some of the best shooters in the world. But at the same time, the guy is an undersized power forward playing point guard. So it's hard to deny that he's just pretty good. If he's your best offensive talent, you're probably not going to do well. But any guy that can drop a triple-double like that and play point guard and also be your center is a pretty good player regardless of that team's record. And he's proven himself when he's surrounded with the right pieces. He gets way too much hate. He gets way too much blame for how this Warrior season's going when it's not his fault. He's not surrounded with the right pieces. Any player not surrounded with the right pieces is going to struggle winning games. That's just a fact. Justice Winslow, unfortunately, it seems to be a running pattern at this point. He gets injured. He has a streak of pretty strong games with low field goal percentage and low free throw percentage, and then he gets injured again. It's getting tiresome at this point. I probably wouldn't recommend picking him up at all, especially with all the mouths to feed on the Heat that are being productive and staying healthier. I don't know that there's really a path to minutes for him anymore. I really do like the versatility of his positions, but outside of that, I'm holding back. Alex Len has had probably his best stretch of the season, but similar to with the Suns, having DeAndre Ayton back, John Collins is going to be back soon, and chances are Alex Len won't have the opportunity to be very productive. I would probably prefer someone like Ivica Zubac if I had the chance to pick between both. DeAndre Jordan is having a pretty decent season. Now, I know I haven't heavily recommended him in the past, but it looks like him and Jared Allen have both found a way to be pretty valuable contributors. So, DeAndre Jordan's averaging close to a low-end double-double. He's a basket away, less than half a rebound away from a double-double. He's getting you over a block, low turnovers, really high field goal percentage. Looks like he has the highest field goal percentage in the league. And the free throw percentage isn't the best, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. He's actually hit all of his free throws here the last 4 games. So I'm going to say it's time to pick him up. It might be too late, actually, but I wasn't high on him. I know some people questioned me on not being so high on him, but he's been pretty productive. And with that big man role, the returning players shouldn't really affect that too much. I think it's just him and Jared Allen, and they found a way to both coexist, getting that 20, 25 minutes a game. All right. So I will do my best to at least do this 3 times a week going forward, especially after the heavy game nights like the Wednesdays, the Mondays, and the Fridays. And I hope this was useful to you. I hope you're happy that I'm making videos again. And if you're not, then I'm sorry. But all right, please go ahead and subscribe, like, share my content. Help me grow this channel so that I can keep doing this for you guys. Until next time, this is Brock Lesnar. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Much appreciation and love to all of you. Bye.